You're broken down and tired of living life on the merry-go-round, and you can't find a fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out. Move mountains, we gon' walk it out and move.
Good evening, and welcome to another edition of the Rankin, Mon Valley, Pittsburgh section of the National Council of Negro Women. My name is Alecia Gibbs, and I am the first Vice President of our section. Joining me this evening is Shirl Coprich, and she is our section chaplain. We thank all of you who have participated in our previous programs, and we hope you're going to join us again by calling in at 412-231-2288 with your questions and or comments. The number will remain on the screen. Again, that's 412-231-2288. Our special guest today is Mr. Bruce Barnes. He is a local amateur historian, and he's going to help us discuss the Black Panther Party and the historical time frame from the mid-60s to the 70s. This program this evening satisfies one of our national mandates, which is to disseminate information on issues affecting African American women and their families, and also one of our Four for the Future initiatives, which is to champion civil and human rights. So welcome, Mr. Barnes, and thank you for appearing on our program this evening.
Thank you for having me.
Before we begin our discussion, let's take a look at a short clip about the Black Panther Party. Can you please show that historical brief?
One of the most well-known civil rights organizations of the late 1960s was the Black Panther Party. Who started the Black Panther Party? What did the group advocate? In many northern and western cities in the United States, African Americans were living in urban ghettos with high unemployment rates and substandard housing. Many also believed that they were treated unfairly and in some cases even brutalized by police forces which did not represent them. For example, Oakland, California had 661 police officers, yet only 16 of those were African American. Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale had been involved in many different civil rights organizations in their young lives, including those who promoted the Black Power ideology. However, they were frustrated with the failure of these organizations to combat police brutality and other injustices they saw in their communities. In October of 1966, the two men formed the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, later simply known as the Black Panther Party. They organized armed patrols that would follow police officers, monitoring them for incidents of abuse. If the police attempted to confront them, Black Panther members would recite the state and federal laws which permitted them to carry their loaded weapons. The Black Panther Party first gained national attention after an incident in 1967. The group carried loaded firearms into the California State Assembly in protest of a piece of legislation which would make carrying loaded firearms illegal. 6 of the members were arrested for this incident. In May of 1967, the Black Panther Party issued a list of 10 points which stated their beliefs and values. This list included things such as full employment, decent housing, and an end to police brutality. They also sought education for African Americans and justice within the court system. The group's ideals resonated within the Black community, and their numbers expanded rapidly. By 1968, the Black Panther Party had a presence in more than 20 major American cities, including New York City, Chicago, Boston, Dallas, Los Angeles, and Washington, D.C. Some estimates claim that their membership numbers were as high as 10,000 at its peak in 1969. The party also boasted an influential newspaper which was read by more than 250,000 people. Its editor was Eldridge Cleaver, and he became a persuasive voice within the Black Power movement. Cleaver would eventually become the third most prominent member of the Black Panther Party, behind Newton and Seal. The Black Panther Party also started community-friendly programs, such as the Free Breakfast for Children program. They believed that they could provide for the needs of those in poverty better than the government could. It has been estimated that the Black Panther Party fed more than 20,000 children through this program during the 1968 and 1969 school year. The organization offered other services as well, including clothes distribution, classes on politics and economics, free medical care, and lessons on self-defense and first aid. They also set up an ambulance program and drug rehabilitation services. However, the Federal Bureau of Investigation did not agree with many of the organization's paramilitary activities, such as carrying loaded guns. The FBI regarded them as a black nationalist hate group, and FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover even referred to them as the greatest threat to the internal security of the country. The group was targeted for investigation with the intent of weakening the group's power and damaging their credibility. The Black Panther Party continued to exist as an organization throughout the 1970s, but never regained the prestige they had once enjoyed. Over the course of that decade, their numbers dwindled away until, by 1980, only 27 people were still official members of the Black Panther Party.
So that's just a brief history of the Black Panther Party that's going to lead us into some discussion this evening. Shirl?
Okay, Mr. Barnes, we understand that there was no chapter of the Black Panthers in Pittsburgh. So can you elaborate on the historical period that you experienced, the history?
To my knowledge, there was not a chapter here in the Pittsburgh area, although the newspaper was available, was circulated. And I, as a historian, I used to have some copies, and I tried to find them, tried to locate them for tonight's show. I wasn't able to do that. But the newspaper was circulated here, and I got a chance and an opportunity to read it from time to time. Because in 1967, I was a young teenager. And so like I said, I did have access to the newspaper. And I also have a copy of some magazines that I collected and have kept. Here's a copy of a Newsweek magazine, if you could zero in on this. Newsweek magazine, The Panthers and the Law. This was from February 23rd, 1970. And I also have a Jet magazine here, May 11th, 1972, special report on the Black Panthers. And this is Huey P. Newton sitting in the chair, not the traditional pose, but a different chair. So these are some of the things that I keep copies of different magazines.
Okay.
Also, during that time frame, we must keep in mind that during that time period from like maybe the early 60s, from the assassination of Medgar Evers, probably up through the late 60s, were probably the most tumultuous times, social times in American history. Mm-hmm. There were a whole lot of different social movements. It was like a quiet storm. You had the civil rights movement was going on. You had the anti-war movement, anti-Vietnam War movement was going on. You had the free love, the hippies, the free love movement was going on. You had the music was speaking to the aspirations of the young people in particular. You had the black identity, black power movement, people that are lived through the 60s must remember that it wasn't okay to be black, literally, until that song by James Brown came out, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. Until then, that was not a positive thing. And if you called somebody black or mentioned that to a person, those were fighting words back in those days. We kind of take that for granted now. So there were a lot of social things going on. This gentleman here, here's a newspaper from the day after the assassination of Malcolm X. So you had the Black Muslim movement was going on. You had the civil rights movement. You had all these different movements that were going on at the same time. It was like a conflagration of all these different social energies that were going down.
Absolutely. Now, the Black Panther Party was founded 52 years ago to fill the needs of those who were neglected in our society. They started with the free breakfast programs for children. They had free clinics for a greater Oakland community. They brought Black history to American schools. They brought the free clinics for neighborhoods that were staffed by idealistic doctors and students in need of hands-on education. However, people want to describe the Black Panther Party as a hate group. The original name for the party was the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. Do you feel that most of society will someday look at the organization in its true light, its the beginnings?
Well, truth always rises to the top eventually. And this is a perfect example about how the media changed the discussion. You know, the Panthers came into existence for self-defense. That was the name of the actual party. Yes. And so they turned the victim into the perpetrator, and they turned the perpetrators into the victims. So they had them painted as the people that were promoting violence. They were promoting self-defense to violence being perpetrated upon black people, like it has been more recently, where unarmed people have been shot. The police brutality was what brought about the Panthers' existence in the first place.
Absolutely. Shirl?
Okay, the Black Panthers had a 10-point program. And let us we have a short clip. You mind showing the clip for us, please?
Black is beautiful. That I want to free. Black is beautiful.
Number 1, we want freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of our Black and oppressed communities.
Number 2, we want full employment for our people.
Number 3, we want an end to the robbery by the capitalists of our Black and oppressed communities.
Number 4, we want decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings.
Number 5, we want decent education for our people that exposes the true nature of this decadent American society. We want education that teaches us our true history and our role in present-day society.
Number 6, we want completely free health care for all Black and oppressed people. Number 7, we want an immediate end to police brutality and murder of Black people, other people of color, all oppressed people inside the United States.
Number 8, we want an immediate end to all wars of aggression.
Number 9, we want freedom for all Black and oppressed people now held in U.S. federal, state, county, city, and military prisons and jails. We want trials by a jury of peers for all persons charged with so-called crimes under the laws of this country.
Number 10, we want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, peace, and the people's community control over modern technology.
How interesting some of those questions on the 10-point program, those demands, are still pertinent today. 52 years later, we can still say that those are some very important points that we still ask for. Those 10 points remind us of how important it is to go out and vote on Tuesday. Given the atmosphere in the White House today, we have to really remember that voting is a chance to use your voice to make changes in our community. Black people should go out and vote at 100%, And when the Black Panther Party was destroyed by the COINTELPRO division of the FBI, some of the members went into politics, like Elaine Brown, Bobby Seale. Can you talk a little bit about Elaine Brown or Bobby Seale or any of that information at that time? Okay, that's a little too specific. Okay, we'll come back to that in a little bit. Let's take a look, though, at a clip that we have that speak to some of the lies that were spread throughout America.
And some of you may be familiar with the Black Panther Party. For those of you who are not, it was an organization that started in 1966 in Oakland, California, as an effort to prevent the police brutality and murder of black people. But it also organized around a range of other issues that were affecting the black community, like health care and housing and full employment and fairness in the courts. They wanted blacks to be tried by juries of their peers because to that point they were being tried by all whites. Well, while they were organizing around these issues, the press was vilifying them and demonizing them and telling lies about them. In fact, one of the lies is that it was just a group of black men who wanted to go out and kill white people. That's what they were about. Nothing could be further from the truth. The fact of the matter is the Black Panther Party, the majority of the people in the Black Panther Party were not men, they were women. And a few years after the party started, the majority of the leadership of the Black Panther Party were women. And so it just wasn't true that there's this group of black men going around killing white people. Another lie that's been told about this organization is that it was racist and anti-white and they just didn't like white people at all. Well, also not true, and I'll prove that to you. The Panthers would find out what the problems were in their communities and attempt to solve them. For example, they realized that children weren't learning in school, and they weren't learning because they were hungry. So they decided to feed the children. They were going to feed them before school, so they created these free breakfast programs. And the way they created these programs was to go to the grocery stores in their communities, ask the grocery store owners if they would donate milk and bread and eggs and meat and cereal, other things people eat for breakfast. And these store owners said yes, and they donated these items. And all over the country, and every city where there was a chapter of the Black Panther Party, and there was about 40, there was a free breakfast program. So it's not likely that these white business owners would donate to the Black Panther Party if they were actually racist. Another thing they did in the community to serve the people was they created free health clinics. And again, they went around and found out there were a range of health problems that needed to be attended to. Black people were rather poor, so they couldn't afford to go to doctors, couldn't afford to go to hospitals. So the Panthers went to hospitals and medical schools and asked the doctors and medical students whether they would come to the black community and deal with some of these medical issues. And overwhelmingly, they said yes. So again, all over the country in cities wherever the Black Panther Party set up chapters, there were these free health clinics. Although they were being run by the Black Panther Party, they were peopled by white people. So I don't know how they could be racist and anti-white if their signature programs were actually being supported by fairly wealthy and often middle-class white people. One of the people who was...
It is so important to dispel the myths and the lies that were spread about this period in history. The next clip that we're going to take a look at is going to speak to the Black Panthers and why the FBI hated them so much. We find that the FBI tried to destroy the Black Panther Party from inside as well as from the outside. They created these rumors, they created dissension among the party members, and they created rifts between the leadership, and eventually they separated Bobby Seale and Huey Newton. Let's take a look at that next clip that speaks about why the FBI hated the Black Panthers so much.
Police are there not to, in our community, not to promote our welfare or for our security and our safety, but they're there to contain us, brutalize us, and murder us.
This frightened the government because this was the unity between the most oppressed of the people in the United States. We did what the government would not do, and they were absolutely afraid and said we were the most dangerous, the most threatening to the internal security of the United States. As the party grew, we were more and more stalked and surveilled by the FBI.
All power to the people!
We changed language. We changed social order. We talked about the power that we hold. Our slogan, all power to the people, changed the way people thought about themselves. We were motivated by love for the people.
That clip indicates that the FBI didn't want black people to be able to change the world for the better, for ourselves. They wanted to keep it as the status quo, with black people continuing to be oppressed. Any thoughts on that?
Power never wants to give up power.
Exactly.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
So it's always going to be a struggle. But a lot of the things in the 10-point platform that they say they wanted were things that they were actually doing. Like, I didn't know they had health care. I knew they had the breakfast program in the school. So a lot of the things they said they wanted in education, teach the truth. Well, it's our responsibility to teach our children our history.
Yes.
And so they were doing that. So a lot of those things weren't demands from the government per se, is they were just expressions of things they would like to see and that they were willing to work toward to make happen and come into reality.
Shirl?
Okay, there was an act entitled the Mulford Act, and the reason why they created this act to ban anybody from displaying them loaded, for carrying loaded weapons, for carrying weapons.
So we had gun control?
And this was passed in California in
California.
1967, yeah.
After the brothers came into the state legislature.
Yeah, and
Okay.
yeah, and the Black Panthers used to follow the police around, so.
Well, that was legal.
It was legal?
As long as they stayed a certain distance away from them.
Okay.
They could observe the policemen as long as they didn't interfere with the policemen's performance of their duties.
Right, so no one would be mistreated.
So they can observe, like today, today they have YouTube and stuff. You know, people, they don't just observe, they actually film it today.
Yes.
Back then, they didn't have video, so just think of how many cases of brutality that probably were conducted back when they didn't have video of these kind of incidents between black people and the police.
Right.
You know, so it's nothing new. It's just something's always been going on. They just have cameras now to be able to capture these types of injustices and excessive uses of force.
True, absolutely.
Yeah, and I bet many people didn't know about Huey P. Newton was studying law in Oakland Community College when he met Bobby Seals, and that's when the Black Panthers formed the party. And I'm assuming that when the members were followed by the police around with the guns and law books, they were, is that what intimidated the police?
Well, you're not supposed to stand up to them, period. How dare they?
Yeah.
You know, but they were within their legal rights, because like you said, Huey was a law student, so they researched to see what they could do legally and what they couldn't do, so they were within their legal rights at the time. Whereas the FBI wasn't, illegal wiretaps and all kind of other things that they were doing with our taxpayer dollars.
Okay. Okay, when we talk about the Black Panther Party, we focus mainly on the men in the party, but there were women who had important positions in the party too. And us being the National Council of Negro Women, we have to talk about these things. And we have a short clip that we would like to show on the women.
These
in the
women
party.
were the unsung heroes of the Black Panther Party. The Black Panther Party was established in the 1960s to empower the black community. The group offered free breakfasts for kids in impoverished neighborhoods and challenged police brutality by patrolling neighborhoods where it had occurred. When we look at old black and white photos of the Black Panther Party, we mostly see the faces of the strong male leaders. But what about the ladies, who were just as influential as the men? Let's meet the women of the Black Panther Party.
That is directly related or indirectly related to the whole scheme of still attempting to make the party look as though we're a group of hoodlums.
Elaine Brown was the chairwoman of the Black Panther Party from 1974 to 1977, and she was a political force to be reckoned with. She ran twice for a position in the Oakland City Council, the city where the Black Panther Party originated. She was a writer for the Los Angeles radical paper Harambe and carried that journalistic experience well into her years with the Panthers, when she became the editor for the party paper. Elaine still remains a well-respected member of the political black community and has written several books about her time with the party, notably A Taste of Power, which was optioned by HBO for an upcoming documentary series. Elaine founded multiple nonprofits aimed at bettering the justice system for the black community, including the National Alliance for Radical Prison Reform, which is based in Atlanta. The nonprofit oversees more than 5,000 prisoners and helps them continue to live a healthy life after their release.
This brother here, myself, all of us were born with our hair like this.
Kathleen Cleaver always kept busy as a female revolutionary. From traveling the world while working in a foreign service to being involved in the civil rights movement, Kathleen is an educated woman who was always involved in the movement one way or another. She joined the party after marrying Eldridge Cleaver and became the party's national communications secretary. Kathleen later went on to be one of the first women to be appointed to the party's central committee and helped charge the effort to release Huey P. Newton, who co-founded the party in 1966 with Bobby Seale during his imprisonment. Kathleen wound up divorcing her husband after returning to the U.S. from an adventure in Algeria and Mexico. She now teaches at Yale University and is possibly one of the most badass Ivy League professors of all time.
When you talk about a revolution, most people think violence, without realizing that the real content of any kind of revolutionary thrust lies in the principles.
Angela Davis is probably the most recognized female member of the party, but she eventually left the Black Panthers because of the misogyny she experienced in the community. Being the independent political activist she is, Angela went on to work closely with the black communist organization Che Lumumba Club. She's a prominent feminist who has written numerous books and lectured as a professor at institutes including UCLA and the University of California, Santa Cruz, where she still teaches.
Angela Davis was just here last week.
Yes, she was here recently. Yes.
Did you go see her?
I did not have the opportunity to see her,
Me neither.
but she's one of the most recognized women in the party. Yeah.
I saw her at Pitt some years ago.
And what's your thoughts on Angela Davis?
Well, strong sister. Like that clip just showed, some of the members of the party were also active in other movements. Like I said, you had all these social movements going on at the same time, and a lot of these people were active in more than one. So she was active in the Black Panther Party, but she was also active in other things going on in the black community, with the prison reform and just organizing, community organizing, and around female issues also. So she's been a champion in that regard for many, many years. And a lot of young people don't know who she is. But that's our responsibility to make sure that they do know who she is.
Absolutely. Do you happen to have any photos or any historical information on Eldridge Cleaver or any of the women that were in the party at the time?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
I have some other albums here. If you can see this.
Okay,
for you young people, these are called albums. 33 speed albums. And the wisdom, this is entitled The Wisdom of Malcolm X. On the back, it says, without Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, Martin Luther King Jr., and Whitney Young Jr., there would be no SNCC, no CORE, no Black Power, or Black Panthers. Think what you may, admit or not, the future of black leaders must be built on the foundations of the combinations laid down by these men who founded and encouraged the organizations, be they nonviolent, revolutionary, or social activists. And on the back, they have a picture of Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, Whitney Young, and Martin Luther King. Those are the gentlemen on the back. Some years ago, I had the opportunity to visit Medgar Evers' home in Jackson, Mississippi. We took a busload of kids on a civil rights tour from here in Pittsburgh. And our first stop was Memphis, Tennessee, on the 40th anniversary of Martin Luther King being assassinated. And Jesse Jackson Jr. was the keynote speaker, so our kids got to meet him. We got to tour the Lorraine Hotel and the Civil Rights Museum there in Memphis. And after that, we went to Jackson, Mississippi. That was my first time being that deep in the South. And we had a docent that led us through Medgar Evers' home, and it's exactly the way it was in 1963. There's a Jet magazine sitting on the coffee table with an Ebony magazine sitting there also. Small television about this big, black and white. And the docent was explaining some of the history about Medgar Evers, how he had gone to the Korean War. When he came back from the Korean War, he played football for Alcorn State University in Mississippi. And so he was older than his wife, Merle, because he had come back from the war. He had been in the service for a few years. And while she was explaining this to us, her cell phone rang and she took the message. And so she excused herself. And then 10 minutes later, Merle Evers walks in the door, Medgar Evers' wife. She's a professor at Alcorn State. And that was her on the telephone who called the docent. And the docent told her that she had 2 busloads of people who came from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to visit her home. And so she said, well, I must come over. So we didn't expect her to be there, but she came over because she wanted to thank us for coming all the way from Pittsburgh to Jackson, Mississippi. And we actually stood in the spot where Medgar Evers was killed, right in the carport next to his kitchen door. And when she came in, we all surrounded her and thanked her for her and her family's sacrifice that they made so that we would have a better life. And it was such a moving, totally unprepared, unrehearsed experience that I'll never forget that. And to this day, some of those kids, I still see them and they still refer to that moment, which they will never forget.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a beautiful perspective on going south. For those who are just tuning in, we are talking with, we have Mr. Bruce Barnes, who is a local amateur historian, and he's discussing the historical time frame from the mid-60s to the 70s, and he's helping us to discuss the Black Panther Party. Now, again, you were just speaking about men again. Speaking about Eldridge Cleaver, he was an author who wrote the book Soul on Ice. And that book was an inspiration behind him getting the position of Minister of Information for the Black Panther Party. And that book was so relevant to the Black Panther Party. We also can take a look at the movie Black Klansman, which just came out this year in 2018, and they showed a little bit about one of our important men of that era, Stokely Carmichael. And he was drafted as the Field Marshal of the East Coast in June of 1967. Do you have any information on Stokely Carmichael?
Stokely Carmichael. No, ma'am. I don't have any historical.
All right. No historical information on him.
On her.
Okay. That's all right. Okay. All right. Looks like we have a caller. Caller, can you please say your name and tell us where you're calling from?
Yes, good evening. My name is Mark, and I'm calling from the north side. And just wanted to say greetings to all of you there. I wanted to call in earlier, but this was just good information. I don't know where you get these clippings from, but unbelievable. And Brother Bruce is bringing a perspective that is so unique as well, and I appreciate that. My question I want to ask, and I'll ask it and then hang up, and that is, you showed the clip of one of the things that the Panthers were doing in the neighborhood, and that was feeding the children. It is my understanding that that concept or the plan was eventually taken by the government and eventually became the Head Start or the preschool program or something to that effect. And so the question is, if that's true, were they ever recognized for that? Or was there any agency, organization, or even any branch of the government that gave the history of where they found out about the program? I'll hang up and listen, just curious to get your response. Thank you so much for the information.
Thank you for calling in, Mark. We always enjoy you calling in and sharing your perspective on our program. Yes, we do believe, and it is believed, that the program started by the Black Panther Party many years ago was a catalyst to the beginning of the Head Start and the food feeding program, the breakfast programs that they have today. And unfortunately, there is no recognition for that start and that catalyst that began those programs. But thank you for your question. It is important to look back and take a look at American history as a whole and then tie those things together. And then we would see that you can make a connection between the programs that the Black Panther Party started and the programs that we have today, Head Start and the general breakfast feeding program in the schools today.
Yes. You can argue who was best. You cannot argue who was first. Okay.
Absolutely.
And what's so inspiring about that is they didn't wait on the government to do this. These are programs that they saw a need in the community, and they went out and engaged the grocery stores, as the clip said, and talked to the people who they support to see if they would support them, and they did. So naturally, if they viewed the Panthers as being the biggest threat, that they would not give them credit for being the impetus for such programs. But like I said, you can argue who's best. You cannot argue who was first. So they were doing it first. So the precursor to the preschool programs, the breakfast and free lunch programs that we see today. They may never get credit for it, but this is why we need to have programs like this to air the truth. Like you said, will the truth ever come out? The truth is coming out now. Some of those clips you showed highlighted the truth about what they really were doing. Like I said, they were all about the community. And the reason why they feared them so was because they were taking care of human beings' basic needs: feeding, housing, clothing. You know, they were taking care of those needs when the government was not that the government is supposed to anyway, but no one else was addressing those needs. So the Panthers saw that as something that they wanted to take upon themselves to address, and they did so. So that's what that I loved about them, is they took the initiative. They don't need anybody's approval to take care of your brother, man. You don't need it. In the community I grew up in, we were a community. And so your mother would look out for me just like my mother would look out for you. And if I didn't have anything to eat and your mother knew it, she wouldn't mind me sitting at your table. But that's back when we used to be like that. So you don't need anybody's permission to do that.
Right. You don't need permission to love your brothers and sisters, and that's what we have been taught. Looks like we have another caller. Caller, can you please say your name and tell us where you're calling from?
Yes, this is Jim from the East End.
Good evening, Jim.
Yeah, I was just calling. I had a couple questions I wanted to ask. I was wondering, were there any white members in the Black Panther Party that any of you know of?
I think I did see where there was a European gentleman that had some position in the party in Oakland.
I see. And just from doing some reading, I noticed that I think there's 19 Panthers still in jail. over 40 years for something that happened in the 70s and 80s. They're still in prison for basically doing nothing wrong.
Absolutely, and it's unfortunate that that continues to occur, that people are imprisoned and they're imprisoned unjustly.
Yeah, and what Herbert Hoover did, he infiltrated the Panthers with a lot of people, and one of the people was William O'Neill, and he became the director of security for the Black Panther Party. So he was privy to all kinds of information.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just one more point that I happened to see. I just wanted to see how popular the Panthers were in the 60s. When they were just forming, I read where only 5% of African Americans favored the Black Panther Party, which I found kind of surprising.
Well, you got to remember, like I said, all these social movements were going on. That was the same time that the civil rights movement was going on. And as you know, that was basically church-based. So, you know, the Panthers were naturally viewed as being very radical and extremist. And when they showed up with the guns, it turned off a lot of Europeans as well as older black people, too. So they didn't want to identify with such a radical suggestion of a solution.
Right.
So,
and you know, Hoover would always say the Panthers are so dangerous. But then you had the KKK doing all kinds of things, and they're still in existence today.
well, evidently they didn't target them the way they said target and disrupt the Panthers. Evidently they haven't taken that to those measures to the Klan.
Right. And with our president that we have now, there might be a need for the Panthers to come back again, because he's trying to put all of us back in slavery.
Yes, absolutely. There is a definite need to make a change in what's going on in society today. And
That's coming up Tuesday.
it is. The first thing we can do is go out and make sure we have 100% of our voters to go out. Those who are eligible to vote, go out and let your voices be heard on Tuesday.
And as I hang up, I want to tell everyone who's listening, please go next Tuesday and vote. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for calling. Looks like we have another caller. Caller, can you please say your name and tell us where you're calling from?
Hey, it's Luke from the east side. What's up, Bruce? How you doing?
Lou.
Man, I don't know how you all got it. I've been trying to get in touch with Bruce, but I guess I got to catch him on TV.
No, you got to have your mom call me. Now, you know when your mom calls, I jump.
I hear you, man. Hey, I like the information you guys are talking about. I caught the show late, so I don't know if you touched on it before, but I know recently there was a newer Black Panther Party, and I guess Malik Shabazz was part of it. How does that tie in, if you know, to the old Black Panther Party, Bruce?
Yeah, I don't think they're affiliated with them at all, really. Malik Zulu Shabazz, the brother from D.C., he took over after...
The great Howard, Bruce.
He took over after Brother Khalid Muhammad died.
Right.
But they don't have any connection, I think, to the older Black Panther Party. Bobby Seale and them kind of disowned them.
Oh, okay.
And take offense to them using their name.
What the connection is? It just they just didn't follow their points, or what? That's what
they just reviving their spirit, you know.
Okay.
Because you know those guys from Howard can be kind of radical.
Howard and Lincoln.
This is true.
You know, we kind of set the trend, Bruce. You already know about that.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to talk about. I know the last caller mentioned how many of them were in jail, but some of them are now in Congress, I guess, right? Some of the former Black Panthers.
Yes, there are some who have moved into politics. That is correct.
Now, what are your thoughts about that, Bruce? I mean, do you think?
Well, in Chicago, I'm trying to think of who the brother in Chicago that was a Panther that's big in politics.
Elijah Cummings, maybe?
No, not Elijah Cummings.
Not Cummings.
Not him.
Not Bobby.
Not Bobby Seale. I think Bobby Seale lives in Philly.
Okay.
Bobby Rush.
Bobby Rush, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, he's like a county commissioner in Cook County
Okay.
in Chicago. So, yeah, he's big time into politics.
Okay. I mean, you think that was a natural progression or what? I mean, I know.
Well, yeah, because like I said, you know, a lot of those people, they weren't just in the Black Panther Party. They were active in the civil rights movement. They were active in the Black Power movement. They were active in those kind of social movements that were going on simultaneously. Okay. So this is somebody that's just committed to our community, and they want to be involved in doing something to benefit our community. And like I said, most things that we can do, we don't need anybody's permission to do. It's just that we will not unify and actually take action.
Right.
That's our biggest problem. We know what a lot of the problems are. Huh?
Right. And the last question, Bruce, the way, you know, they murdered and killed so many of the Black Panther Party, it was just criminal acts. You know, Fred Hampton killed in his bed while he was asleep. And, you know, I just think, you know, the crimes committed against the Black Party in general, Black Panther Party in general, I mean, really need to be investigated because we don't know the depths of what happened to a lot of them. But we do know about Fred Hampton, how he was sleeping in his bed and was blown away in front of his wife. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was just tragic.
I don't think anybody was really prosecuted for that either.
Exactly. Well, much like what goes on now. But great show. I'm enjoying the information, Bruce, and to everyone on the panel. Thanks for presenting this show, and I'm learning a lot.
Thank you so
Hey,
much
Bruce,
for your
give me a call
call.
back.
All right, Lou.
All right, later.
See.
As our caller stated, a lot of what happened in the past is still continuing today. We're still encountering police brutality today. And this next clip that we're going to look at shows a little about how things have not changed much from 52 years ago when the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense was founded. Can you please show that clip?
The stories in the news today remind me of the sentiments of almost 50 years ago, when many young black people felt that policing for them was unfair.
During that time period, being black in America meant that you didn't walk down the street with the same sense of safety and the same sense of privilege as a white person.
There was absolutely no difference in the way the police treated us in Mississippi than they did in California.
The police jump on you, beat you up, put the gun at your head. This is what we were going through on a daily basis.
I'm tired of it. I'll stay here as long as I have to.
Now, as then, the need for change is real. Nearly every black man I know has a story about an encounter with the police. I myself have been stopped, searched, and had a gun put to my head for no rational reason.
There.
One response to police brutality in 1966 was the founding of the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense.
We use the Black Panther as our symbol because of the nature of a panther. The panther doesn't strike anyone, but when he's assailed upon, that he'll back up first. But if the aggressor continues, then he'll strike out.
When I first met Huey and Bobby, they were in the process of forming an organization for primarily self-defense. We didn't plan to have a nationwide organization or anything like that. We were organized and dealing with the problems in Oakland.
In 1966, California law allowed civilians to carry loaded weapons as long as they were not concealed, as do many states today. And the newly formed Black Panther Party took advantage of the law.
The California Penal Code Section 12020 through 12027, and also the Second Amendment of the Constitution guarantees the citizen a right to bear arms on public property.
Huey said we're going to carry our guns and we're going to follow the police. And if they stop someone, we're going to stop. We're going to maintain a legal distance. And we're going to observe these so-called law officers in the performance of their duty.
While you're coming around the corner, just stay facing the way you are.
We would stop. We would get out of the cars. We would walk up to the scene. Those who had rifles would carry them in the open, clearly visible.
We would stand at a distance where the police couldn't say they were interfering with their arrest or their detention of the individual, and make sure that there was no brutality.
The police were confronted by citizens who were not just voicing their opinions, but were armed.
They would take the weapon and pass it across like this, and it would sweep right over the officer.
No one would do anything until a policeman ejected around in the chamber. Then we would all eject rounds in the chamber, and all up and down the street you could hear this clackety clack, 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 clack.
And then when the traffic stop or the incident's over, they bring the weapon down across by you like this and get back in their car and drive off. It was pretty intimidating.
The Black Panther Party spread quickly, partly because young African Americans across the country had similar experiences with the police.
We would get calls from Atlanta, Nashville, Raleigh, North Carolina, from Washington, D.C., Bridgeport, Connecticut. Every city, small or large you can think of, wanted a chapter of the Black Panther Party.
There's no question that the Panthers were provocative, but there's also no question that law enforcement exaggerated the threat they posed and overreacted.
Do you feel the nation is in trouble?
I think very definitely it is.
Well, what is the answer?
The answer is vigorous law enforcement.
That's the only answer?
That's the only answer.
How about justice? You hear a lot about justice with law enforcement.
Justice is merely incidental to law and order.
FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover today asserted that the Black Panthers represent the greatest internal threat to the nation. Hoover said the Panthers have perpetrated numerous assaults on police and have engaged in violent confrontations throughout the country.
When Hoover identified the Black Panther Party as the #1 threat to the national security of the United States at a time when they're fighting in Vietnam, of course that was crazy, but it was politically very effective. And it says to law enforcement at the local level, we can take the gloves off now. We don't have to respect the civil liberties, and we can go after them with everything we got.
Police say there was sniper fire throughout the early morning hours, so they moved in cautiously.
Police and
then
Black
began
Panthers clash in Houston, New Orleans, and other cities.
The Black Panther police shootout in the pre-dawn hours in Chicago today. Police and Negroes fought a pitched battle.
Obviously, we are nowhere near this today. In fact, we may be at a transformative moment. People of all ages and races are recognizing the problems with policing in Black communities and are protesting.
Can't take it no more! Can't take it no more! Can't take it no more!
Attention, this is the police department.
Now, there is a chance for real change. But police departments and political leaders must not overreact as they did 50 years ago. They need to listen.
When I say no, you say violence. No.
Violence!
No.
Violence!
When I say no, you say violence. No.
Violence!
No.
Violence!
No justice!
No peace!
No justice!
No peace!
If you listen to the reaction and the words of J. Edgar Hoover 52 years ago, it reminds me of the current leader of our country. Shirl?
Oh, well, what I wanted to say right now is about the incident that happened in Squirrel Hill the other day at the synagogue. And what do you think about the killings by the police? Well, you've already talked about that, so and let us know what's going on with that.
Okay, well, it's senseless violence.
Yeah.
It's senseless violence, yeah. And there is there's very little reaction to that other than you cannot use hate to handle hate. The only thing you can do is use love. Love is what will battle hate. And so we hope that that's what we need to remember. Today, when we take a look at what we just viewed, the thoughts about the new organizations that are starting, such as Black Lives Matter. There's the new Black Panther Party. There are other organizations that are fighting for justice for Black people. And we would, although we have continued to have senseless killings, like the killing at the Tree of Life Synagogue, we pray for those. We pray for the victims, and we keep them in mind. We pray for the family of all those victims, and we pray that, again, that love will conquer all. We would like to thank this evening Mr. Bruce Barnes for appearing on our program, and we would hope that you were able to receive some information. We tried to shed some light on the Black Panther Party and on their ideals that started in the Oakland community and spread across 68 cities in the United States and beyond. And we also want to thank you who watched and those who called in. We hope to see you next time. Again, we will be here on the first Friday of every month. Thank you again.
Okay.
You're broken down and tired of living life on the merry-go-round, and you can't find a fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out. Move mountains, we gon' walk it out and move mountains.